Today, we're going to take a tour of the Sound City Studios plugin. Before we dive in, let's hear what it sounds like on this track from our friend Soldier Story that was recorded dry and brought to life using the plugin.
You say you don't recognize me, but you don't know where I've been. I got one foot in front of the other, the gas can't fill the ground. Just take your time. Rise up, really mind. Just take your time.
Sound City Studios is a groundbreaking mixing and sound design tool that lets you immerse your tracks in the sound of one of the most legendary studios of all time. Sound City has shaped the tone of rock, pop, metal, and alternative music from the late 60s through today. And it's home of some of the most famous records from acts like Fleetwood Mac, Tom Petty, Metallica, and Nirvana. There's been so many iconic records made at Sound City that there's even a full-length documentary directed by Dave Grohl chronicling the studio's history and the impact that it's had on modern music. Now, with the Sound City Studios plugin, you can give your tracks the same Pro Studio sound by dropping them right into the same room and signal path, no matter where you recorded them originally. The Sound City plugin gives you a complete studio in a box, letting you transform your tracks by placing them into the Studio A live room using custom-tailored voicings that recreate how the room reacts to different sources. Whether you record in a home studio, a bedroom, or anywhere else, Remic Mode lets you replace the sound of your original microphone with historically accurate mic models curated and placed with the help of Sound City engineers. Sound City Studios also goes beyond the sound of the room and the mics to emulate Sound City's signature console features and unique studio effects in full UA quality, letting you shape your tracks using the same effects and processing tricks that you've heard on some of your favorite records. Now let's dive into the Sound City Studios plugin and see how it's being used in this mix. When you first open the plugin, you'll see a bird's eye view of the Studio A live room. At the top, you'll see a number of sources like drums, guitar, vocal, and more, and if you click on these, you'll see a few different voicing options for each source. These voicing options recreate how the room reacts to different sources based on actual recordings done at Sound City with a huge range of source material. The different options determine where and how the source is placed within the room, and affect things like decay, reflections, and other aspects of the room sound. For drums, we have three different options. Live, which places the drum kit right in the middle of the room with no dampening for a big open sound. Tight, which has the drums set up in the same place but with gobos for a more focused sound. And wood corner for maximum reflections. For this track, I like the open sound of the live option, so let's stick with that for our drum bus. Now let's take a look at the mic controls, which let us shape how sound is captured within the room. You get three different sets of mics, one close mic and two room mics, each with their own historically accurate mono and stereo choices for each source, curated and placed with the help of Sound City's own engineers. If you click the console icon at the right of the plugin GUI, you'll open the console channel strips, which lets you adjust mic distance as well as all of the console's original features like panning, level, filtering, and phase. This console is a huge part of Sound City's sonic identity. Every mic in the plugin passes through it and gets colored by it, just like the countless recordings made at Sound City. The distance controls let you place the mics closer or farther from the source, letting the mics reach further into the space and bring out new characteristics of the room. In addition to the knobs and the channel strips, you can also adjust mic distance by clicking and dragging in the main window. Placing the mics closer to the source will give you a more direct and focused sound, with the sound getting more diffused as you increase the distance. For these drums, I like the sound of the stereo C414s for the close mics, and the mono C12 and stereo KM84s for the room mics. Now let's go ahead and blend these three mics together using the faders and the console channel strips to set our levels. Now let's hear what these drums sound like in the mix. Next, let's check out the guitar bus. Under the guitar sources, we have 6 different options, including PA, 2x12, and 4x12, each with their own live and tight variations. These speaker options let you excite the room in different ways. The PA options give you full range sound with the least amount of coloration from the speakers themselves, while the 2x12 and 4x12 options are actually modeled guitar cabinets, meant to be used with DI guitar tracks recorded without an actual speaker cabinet or cabinet emulation, such as a line output from your real amp or an amp emulator with the cabinet simulation turned off. Now, since the PA speakers are full range, they're also great for use with other sources like bass and synthesizers or anything else that doesn't have a dedicated source in the plugin. For this track, the guitars were played through an actual amp and speaker cabinet, so let's select one of the PA options and dial in our mics. Now let's hear what these guitars sound like in the mix. Next, let's check out the vocals. The Sound City Studios plugin has 2 different options for vocals, solo and group. Now, solo throws sound into the room more directionally, while group has wider dispersion for a more diffuse sound. In this case, I'll use the solo option directly on my lead vocal track, and I'll use the group option on my background vocal bus. Now, so far we've been using Reverb Mode, which fully replaces the sound of the original recording with the Sound City mics. But for this lead vocal track, I want to keep some of the original tone intact, so I'll switch into Reverb Mode. This lets me blend in some of Sound City's room ambience with the original recording using the mix knob, and also enables the pre-delay control for adding some space between the dry recording and the room ambience. Let's hear what that sounds like.
I got 1 foot front of the other, gas can fill to the brim. You got 1 foot front of the other, hair blowing back in the wind. You say you don't recognize me, but you don't know where I've been.
Now let's take a listen to the background vocal bus, which I'm processing with Reverb Mode.
Just take your time, rest your weary mind. Just take your time.
Now these vocals are still pretty raw, so let's take a look at how we can clean them up using the effects. To access the effects panel within the plugin, click the effects icon below the console icon on the right side. There's also individual icons for each effect that let you enable or disable them without opening the panel. Now let's start by pulling up our lead vocal track and cleaning it up a little bit with the EQ. Since we're using Reverb Mode on this track, I'm going to disable the room using the icon above the other effects, and then I'll enable Wet Solo so we can hear just the processed audio. Once we dial in the effects, I'll re-enable the room and disable Wet Solo so we can blend the processed audio back in with our original.
I got 1 foot front of the other, gas can fill to the brim. You got 1 foot front of the other, hair blowing back in the wind. You say you don't recognize me, but you don't know where I've been. I got 1 foot front of the other, gas can fill to the brim. Just take your time, rest your weary mind.
Next, let's see if we can add some life to these vocals using the encode mode in the Dynamics module. Now this mode uses a classic configuration of Sound City's Dolby Type A noise reduction system, which had both encode and decode stages meant to be used on recording and playback respectively. Now in this configuration, only the encode stage is used, which creates a unique multi-band expansion effect that shapes both frequency response and dynamics. Let's go ahead and hear what it sounds like.
I got 1 foot front of the other, gas can fill to the brim. You got 1 foot front of the other, hair blowing back in the wind. You say you don't recognize me, but you don't know where I've been. I got 1 foot front of the other, gas can fill to the brim. Just take your time.
And finally, let's use the reverb chambers just to create a little more space around the vocals.
I got 1 foot front of the other, gas can fill to the brim. You got 1 foot front of the other, hair blowing back in the wind. You say you don't recognize me, but you don't know where I've been. I got 1 foot front of the other, gas can fill to the brim. Just take your time, rest your weary mind.
Now I'll just re-enable the room, disable wet solo, and bring the mix knob down a little bit. Now let's move on to our background vocal bus, and I'm going to start by using the air mode in the dynamics module. This mode disables the lower 2 bands on the Dolby Type A processor for a bright, airy sound that can then be blended in with the original signal. This is a classic trick that can be heard all over background vocals from classic records made in the late 60s through today. Let's hear what it sounds like.
Just take your time, rest your weary mind. Just take your time. Just take your time, rest your weary mind. Just take your time.
I love what air mode is adding to these background vocals. You probably noticed that I unlinked the side chains, which lets the left and right channels be compressed separately and maintain some stereo width. I also enabled the tilt option for the sidechain filter, which makes the module less reactive to low frequencies and more reactive to high frequencies. Now let's just use the reverb chambers to push them back into the mix a little bit.
Just take your time, rest your weary mind. Just take your time.
Before we move on, let's hear what the lead and background vocals sound like in the mix.
You say you don't recognize me, but you don't know where I've been. I got 1 foot front of the other, the gas can't fill the ground. Just take your time, rest your weary mind. Just take your time.
Next, let's see what these effects can add to our drum bus. Once again, I'm going to start by cleaning things up a little bit with the EQ. Now let's check out the crush mode on the dynamics module. This mode turns the Dolby Type A processor into an aggressive single-band compressor that's great on drums and other transient-rich sources. Just like on the background vocals, I'm going to unlink the sidechains to maintain some more of our stereo width. And I'll also start with the tilt option on the sidechain filter enabled, but we'll check out the high pass option on the right side as well so you can hear what that sounds like. Now let's hear what these drums sound like in the mix. You can also change the order of the effects by clicking in the bottom right corner and dragging. For example, placing the chambers before the compressor can give you some really cool aggressive pumping effects, especially with the crush and gated modes. Now that we've dialed in the effects, let's take one final listen to the full mix with and without the Sound City Studios plugin.
You say you don't recognize me, but you don't know where I've been. I got one foot in front of the other, the gas can fill the ground. Just take your time. Last time in line. Just take your time. Yeah.
So as we've heard here, Sound City Studios is an incredibly powerful tool for transforming your dry tracks into polished recordings, whether they were captured in a studio or in your bedroom. And it's also amazing at breathing new life into in-the-box sounds like synths and drum samples. Whether you use it in remic mode to fully immerse your tracks in Sound City tone, or use it in reverb mode to add a touch of realistic room ambience to your mix, this plugin will take your projects to the next level by giving you the sound of one of the most legendary studios of all time right in your DAW. Head over to uaudio.com to try it out for free, and start adding iconic studio sound to your mixes today.